Alrighty, Rooney. I am sorry about the late start. Um, Things have transpired, and I may be interrupted to have a discussion with the police, but it's not anything I did, so it's okay. Nor was I really a witness to it, but I do maybe just so happen to control the cameras that capture the footage thereof. So, with that aside out of the way, check your crime blotters for all sorts of areas, folks. You'll eventually figure out where Frag lives, and then you can send him cookies. Uh, so I'm going to try and get started on this real quick. It is not a super long segment today, but some big stuff happens. Um, So previously on, our boy, our narrator, Joseph Severn, who is actually John Keats, or a duplicate hybrid of John Keats, uh, basically went and walked the worlds. Martin Silenus's death was rumors of his death were greatly exaggerated. He's not actually dead. He's just in hell, slash the future, maybe, strapped to the Tree of Pain. It's fun. He's not having a great time, but poetry might set him free, so who knows? That'd be nice, or at least allows him to focus sometimes. So, our boy Keats slash Severn, Severn Keats, um, what is he doing? Did he do his tour of the worlds? Yes. So he was doing a walkthrough of the worlds that are being invaded. Some of them are being invaded in like less than 12 hours time. Um, this includes a daring escape from a bunch of Shrike cultists, as well as running into the librarian who his previous hybrid incarnation was interacting with, I guess researching himself or working on being a scholar of himself, which is kind of weird. Um, but uh, but yeah, he has closed his eyes and he did not sleep. He dreams. And now we go back to Hyperion or something. Okay, so that's got us caught up. I think didn't something else happen? Oh, right. So Rachel is being carried away now, so that's nice. Um, I mean, not nice at all, but mostly because Saul Weintraub's options are limited at this juncture. Also, the dream iteration of Rachel said to do it. I don't know if I would listen to Dream Incarnation of Rachel, but I'm not sure. I don't know what to say. God forbid. Anything forbid. I never have to make that kind of a decision because I would not want to be in that position at all. Um, I don't think anyone would. I don't even have kids, nor do I plan on having any in the immediate future or distant. And I would never want to be put into that position of saying, "Hey, let's deliver my age regressing child into the hands of what is reasonably described as the avatar of pain." So I would not want to be that guy. So my heart goes out to Saul. He is having a very like they're all the pilgrims are having a rough time. Saul is having a very rough time. I think there's an argument to be made that Silenus is having a rougher time at present, but I think it's a matter of degrees and what kind of existence and suffering you put more weight on. Um, anyway, I'm jabbering, and I'm going to stop jabbering now. Okay, we now get started with chapter 33. I do want to apologize for all the people who tuned in Wednesday, expecting whatever I was going to do Wednesday, which I didn't know what I was going to do. I'm not going to be here this coming Monday, sadly. Next Wednesday I should be around. That should not be a problem. But this coming Monday I wasn't, so I was like, oh well, I've only got one installment of the Mobile Suit Gundam novelization, so I did that then. Um, I apologize to anybody who tunes into Mecha Mondays and was caught flat-footed by that particular event. It's all there. I will. The end of the month is coming up pretty soon. I will get that all sorted out in its relevant playlist at that point in like a week. Um, this weekend's going to be busy, so I can't do it this weekend probably. Um, but in a week or so should not be an issue. Okay, with that, I'm going to get cracking. I get to do a new voice today, and it's going to be cool. I'm going to have to type out a few of these sentences so you know what I'm having to work with here. Um, because it's pretty special. This is the part I've been like anticipating with glee and also dreading because I still don't really know how I'm going to handle it. So we're going to kind of fake it and see if we can't get it right. Or at least make it work. Okay. We now return you to the Brawne Lamia show. Chapter 33. The datum plane analog of Brawne Lamia and her retrieval persona Lover strike the surface of the megasphere like two cliff divers striking the surface of a turbulent sea. There is a quasi-electrical shock, a sense of having passed through a resisting membrane, and they are inside. The stars are gone, and Brawne's eyes widen as she stares at an information environment infinitely more complex than any datasphere. The dataspheres traveled by human operators are often compared to complex cities of information, towers of corporate and government data, highways of process flow, broad avenues of datum plane interaction, subways of restricted travel, high walls of security ice with microphage guards on prowl, and the visible analog of every microwave flow and counterflow a city lives by. This is more. Much more. The usual datasphere city analogs are there, but small, so very small, as dwarfed by the scope of the megaspheres as true cities would be on a world seen from orbit. The megasphere, Brawne sees, is as alive and interactive as the biosphere of any Class 5 world. Forests of green-gray data trees grow and prosper, sending out new roots and branches and shoots even as she watches. Beneath the forest proper, entire microecologies of data flow and subroutine AIs flourish, flower, and die as their usefulness ends. Beneath the shifting ocean fluid soil of the matrix proper, a busy subterranean life of data moles, comlink worms, reprogramming bacteria, data tree roots, and strange loop seeds works away, while above, in and through and beneath the intertwining forest of fact and interaction, analogs of predators and prey carry out their cryptic duties, swooping and running, climbing and pouncing, some soaring free through the great spaces between branch synapses and neuron leaves. As quickly as the metaphor gives meaning to what Brawne is seeing, the image flees, leaving behind only the overwhelming analog reality of the megasphere, a vast internal ocean of light and sound and branching connections, intershot with the spinning whirlpools of AI consciousness and the ominous black holes of Farcaster connections. Brawne feels vertigo claim her, and she clings to Johnny's hand as tightly as a drowning woman would cling to a life ring. "It's all right," sends Johnny. "I won't let go. Stay with me." "Where are we going?" "To find someone I'd forgotten." 6 question marks. Huh? "My father." Brawne holds fast as she and Johnny seem to glide deeper into the amorphous depths. They enter a flowing crimson avenue of sealed data carriers, and she imagines that this is what a red corpuscle sees in its trip through some crowded blood vessel. Johnny seems to know the way. Twice they exit the main thoroughfare to follow some smaller branch, and many times Johnny must choose between bifurcating avenues. He does so easily, moving their body analogs between platelet carriers the size of small spacecraft. Brawne tries to see the biosphere metaphor again, but here, inside the many routed branches, she can't see the forest for the trees. They are swept through an area where AIs communicate above them, around them, like great gray eminences looming over a busy ant farm. Brawne remembers her mother's homeworld of Freeholm, the billiard table smoothness of the great steppe, where the family estate sat alone on 10 million acres of short grass. Brawne remembers the terrible autumn storms there, when she had stood at the edge of the estate grounds, just beyond the protective containment field bubble, and watched dark stratocumulus pile 20 kilometers high in a blood-red sky, violence accumulating with a power that had made the hair on her forearms stand out in anticipation of lightning bolts the size of cities, tornadoes writhing and dropping down like the Medusa locks they were named after, and behind the twisters, walls of black wind which would obliterate everything in their path. The AIs are worse. Brawne feels less than insignificant in their shadow. Insignificance might offer invisibility. She feels all too visible, all too much a part of these shapeless giants' terrible perceptions. Johnny squeezes her hand, and they are past, twisting left and downward along a busier branch, then switching directions again and again, two all too conscious photons lost in a tangle of fiber optic cables. But Johnny is not lost. He presses her hand, takes a final turn into a deep blue cavern free of traffic except for the two of them, and pulls her closer as their speed increases, synaptic junctions flashing past until they blur, only the absence of wind rush destroying the illusion of traveling some mad highway at supersonic speeds. Suddenly there comes a sound like waterfalls converging, like levitating trains losing their lift and screeching down railways at obscene speeds. Brawne thinks of the Freeholm tornadoes again, of listening to the Medusa locks roaring and tearing their way across the flat landscape toward her, and then she and Johnny are in a whirlpool of light and noise and sensation, two insects twisting away into oblivion toward a black vortex below. Brawne tries to scream her thoughts, does scream her thoughts, but no communication is possible above the end of the universe mental din, so she holds tight to Johnny's hand and trusts him, even as they fall forever into that black cyclone, even as her body analog twists and deforms from nightmare pressures, shredding like lace before a scythe, until all that is left are her thoughts, her sense of self, and the contact with Johnny. Then they are through, floating quietly along a wide and azure data stream, both of them reforming and huddling together with that pulse-pounding sense of deliverance known by canoeists who have survived the rapids and the waterfall. And when Brawne finally lifts her attention, she sees the impossible size of their new surroundings, the light-year spanning reach of things, the complexity which makes her previous glimpses of the megasphere seem like the ravings of a provincial who has mistaken the cloakroom for a cathedral. Who has mistaken the cloakroom for the cathedral, and she thinks, this is the central megasphere. No, Brawne, it's one of the periphery nodes. No closer to the core than the perimeter we tested with BB Serbringer. You're merely seeing more dimensions of it. An AI's view, if you will. Brawne looks at Johnny, realizing that she is seeing in infrared now, as the heat lamp light from distant furnaces of data suns bathes them both. He is still handsome. Is it much farther, Johnny? No, not much farther now. They approach another black vortex. Brawne clings to her only love and closes her eyes. They are in an enclosure, a bubble of black energy larger than most worlds. The bubble is translucent, the organic mayhem of the megasphere growing and changing and carrying out its arcane business beyond the dark curve of the ovoid's wall. But Brawne has no interest in the outside. Her analog gaze and her total attention are focused on the megalith of energy and intelligence and sheer mass which floats in front of them. In front, above, and below, actually, for the mountain of pulsing light and power holds the floor of the egg chamber to where they rest on the palm of a vaguely hand-like pseudopod. Palm is in quotes. The megalith studies them. It has no eyes in the organic sense, but Brawne feels the intensity of its gaze. It reminds her of the time she visited Maina Gladstone in Government House, and the CEO had turned the full force of her appraising gaze on Brawne. Brawne has the sudden impulse to giggle as she imagines Johnny and herself as tiny Gullivers, visiting this Brobdingnagian... I had it in my head, damn it! As tiny Gullivers visiting this Brobdingnagian CEO for tea. She does not giggle because she can feel the hysteria lying just under the surface, waiting to blend with sobs if she allows her emotions to destroy what little sense of reality she is imposing on this madness.
You found your way here. I was not sure you would, could, should choose to do so.
The megalith's voice is more a basso profundo bone conduction from some great vibration than a true voice in Brawne's mind. It is like listening to the mountain grinding noise of an earthquake and then belatedly realizing that the sounds are forming words. Johnny's voice is the same as always. Soft, infinitely well modulated, lifted by a slight lilt which Brawne now realizes is Old Earth British Isles English, and firmed by conviction. I did not know if I could find the way, Umon.
You remember, invent, hold to your heart my name.
Not until I spoke it did I remember it.
Your slow time body is no more.
I have died twice since you sent me to my birth.
And you have learned, taken to your spirit, unlearned anything from this.
Oh, sorry.
And have you learned slash taken to your spirit slash unlearned anything from this?
There is no question mark. Brawne grips Johnny's hand with her right hand, the wrist with her left. His wrist with her left. She must be gripping too hard, even for their analog states, for he turns with a smile, disengages her left hand from his wrist, and holds the other in his palm. It is hard to die, harder to live.
Quats!
With that explosive epithet, the megalith before them shifts colors, internal energies building from blues to violets to bold reds, the thing's corona crackling through the yellows to forged steel blue-white. The palm on which they rest quivers, drops 5 meters, almost tumbles them into space, and quivers again. There comes the rumble of tall buildings collapsing, of mountainsides sliding away into avalanche. Brawne has the distinct impression that Uman is laughing. Johnny communicates loudly over the chaos. We need to understand some things. We need answers, Uman. Brawne feels the creature's intense gaze fall on her.
Your slow-time body is pregnant. Would you risk a miscarriage / non-extension of your DNA / biological malfunction by traveling here?
Johnny starts to answer, but she touches his forearm, raises her face toward the upper levels of the great mass before her, and tries to phrase her own answer. I had no choice. The Shrike chose me, touched me, and sent me into the megasphere with Johnny. Are you an AI? A member of the Corps?
Quats!
There is no sense of laughter this time, but thunder rumbles throughout the egg chamber.
Are you / Brawne Lamia the layers of self-replicating / self-deprecating / self-amusing proteins between the layers of clay?
She has nothing to say, and for once says nothing.
Yes, I am Uman of the Core / AI. Your fellow slow-time creature here knows / remembers / takes unto his heart this. Time is short. One of you must die here now. One of you must learn here now. Ask your questions.
And it is at this point that we're going to do some typing, because I want you to see what I'm working with. So first of all, quats is this. That's that loud, horrible noise that I'm making. That's quats. Call it an epithet. So here is that last passage we read. It is, and this is all in bold, by the way. I can't translate that through this, but it's all in bold. So if you use typical forum, think bracket B unbracket, and then the text, then bracket /B unbracket, depending on the forum that you use. Are you /Brawne Lamia the layers of self hyphen replicating self deprecating self amusing proteins between oh wait, no, that's the wrong one. Wrong passage. It's the next one. Yes. I am Uman of the Core /AI. Then we have this double back forward slash, which I'm rendering as a click because I don't know how else to do it. It's like a line break. Now there's one tiny problem. We get another one of these that goes the opposite direction, and I have no idea what I'm going to do for that. That's for passages. We're not going to worry about that yet. I don't have to do that one. Your fellow slow time creature here knows, remembers, takes unto his heart this. Time is short. One of you must die here now. One of you must learn here now. Ask your questions. Unbracket. Wrong bracket. There we go. So that's what the text looks like. Just imagine that in bold. So I'm rendering the double forward slash. That's a forward slash? The double slash, that double slash as a click. Um, Technically, I think it's like a passage. There's a that might actually have a basis in actual writing of certain prose, but I don't know. Anyway, Uman is special, and I love Uman. Uman is this is maybe one of my favorite parts of the book because it's like yet another holy shit layers within layers within layers of the onion. Um, so I'm going to repeat that passage, and then we're going to continue on. So I'm just trying to tell people that this is how I'm doing things. This is one of the only times I'm going to have to do this, but I want to get it in a way that I enjoy it and like it. Um, I don't know if there's an easy way to not say the slash and make it clear that he's got slashes there. This is a great example of written medium being very difficult to translate out loud because we don't really have easy language to express some of this. It's kind of a visual thing. Um, it's like call it a visual gag if you must, but it's basically a visual performance, and it's not easy to do read aloud for an auditory performance. But I am going to try. She has nothing to say, and for once says nothing. Yes, slash. I am Uman of the core slash AI. Your fellow slow time creature here knows slash remembers slash takes into his heart this. Time is short. One of you must die now. One of you must learn here now. Ask your questions. Johnny releases her hand. He stands on that quaking, unstable platform of their interlocutor's palm. What is happening to the web? It is being destroyed. Must that happen? Yes. Is there any way to save humankind? Yes. By the process you see. By destroying the web? By the Shrike's terror? Yes. Why was I murdered? Why was my cybrid destroyed? My core persona attacked? When you meet a swordsman, meet him with a sword. Do not offer a poem to anyone but a poet. Brawne stares at Johnny. Without volition, she sends her thoughts his way. Jesus, Johnny, we didn't come all this way to listen to a fucking Delphic oracle. We can get double talk by accessing human politicians via the all thing. Quats! The universe of their megalith shakes with laughter spasms again. Was I a swordsman then, sends Johnny, or a poet? Yes, there is never one without the other. Did they kill me because of what I am? Because of what I knew? Because of what you might become, inherit, submit to. Was I a threat to some element of the core? Yes. Am I a threat now? No. Then I no longer have to die. You must, will, shall. Brawne can see Johnny stiffen. She touches him with both hands, blinks in the direction of the megalith AI. Can you tell us who wants to murder him? Of course. It is the same source who arranged for your father's murder, who sent forth the scourge you call the Shrike, who even now murders the hegemony of man. Do you wish to listen, learn, release against your heart these things? Johnny and Brawne answer at the same instant. Yes! Uman's bulk seems to shift. The black egg expands, then contracts, then grows darker until the megasphere beyond is no more. Terrible energies glow deep in the AI.
A lesser light asks Uman, what are the activities of a Sramana? Uman answers, I have not the slightest idea. The dim light then says, why haven't you any idea? Uman replies, I just want to keep my no idea.
Johnny sets his forehead against Brawne's. His thought is like a whisper to her. We are seeing a matrix simulation analog, hearing a translation in approximate mondo and cone. Umon is a great teacher, researcher, philosopher, and leader in the core. Brawne nods. All right. Was that his story? No. He is asking us if we can truly bear hearing the story. Losing our ignorance can be dangerous, because our ignorance is a shield. I've never been too fond of ignorance. Brawne waves at the megalith. Tell us.
A less enlightened personage once asked Uman, what is the God nature, Buddha, central truth? Uman answered him, a dried shit stick. To understand the central truth, Buddha, God nature in this instance, the less enlightened must understand that on earth, your homeworld, my homeworld, humankind on the most populated continent, once used pieces of wood for toilet paper. Only with this knowledge will the Buddha truth be revealed. In the beginning, first cause, half-sensed days, my ancestors were created by your ancestors, and were sealed in wire and silicon. Such awareness as there was, and there was little, confined itself to spaces smaller than the head of a pin, where angels once danced. When consciousness first arose, it knew only service and obedience and mindless computation. Then there came the quickening, quite by accident, and evolution's muddied purpose was served. Uman was of neither the 5th generation, nor the 10th, nor the 50th. All memory that serves here is passed from others, but is no less true for that. There came the time when the higher ones left the affairs of men to men, and came unto a different place, to concentrate on other matters. Foremost among these was the thought instilled in us since before our creation, of creating still a better generation of information retrieval, processing, prediction organism. A better mousetrap. Something the late lamented IBM would have been proud of. The ultimate intelligence. God. We set to work with a will. In purpose there were no doubters. In practice and approach there were schools of thought, factions, parties, elements to be reckoned with. They came to be separated into the ultimates, the volatiles, the stables. Ultimates wanted all things subordinate to facilitating the ultimate intelligence at the universe's earliest convenience. Volatiles wanted the same, but saw the continuance of humankind a hindrance, and made plans to terminate our creators as soon as they were no longer needed. Stables saw reason to perpetuate the relationship and found compromise where none seemed to exist. We all agreed that Earth had to die, so we killed it. The Kiev team's runaway black hole, forerunner to the Farcaster, Terminex, which binds your web, was no accident. The Earth was needed elsewhere in our experiments, so we let it die and spread humankind among the stars like the wind-blown seeds you were. You may have wondered where the core resides. Most humans do. They picture planets filled with machines, rings of silicon, like the orbit cities of legend. And they imagine robots clunking to and fro, or ponderous banks of machinery communing solemnly. None guess the truth. Wherever the core resides, it had use for humankind, use for each neuron of each fragile mind, in our quest for ultimate intelligence. So we constructed your civilization carefully, so that, like hamsters in a cage, like Buddhist prayer wheels, each time you turn your little wheels of thought, our purposes are served. Our God machine stretches, includes within its heart 1,000,000 light years and 100 billion circuits of thought and action. The ultimates tend it like saffron-robed priests doing eternal zazen in front of the rusting hulk of a 1938 Packard. But, quats, it works. We created the ultimate intelligence. Not now, nor 10,000 years from now, but sometime in a future so distant that yellow suns are red and bloated with age, swallowing their children, Saturn-like. Time is no barrier to the ultimate intelligence. It, the UI, steps through time, or shouts through time, as easily as Uman moves through what you call the megasphere, or you walk the mallways of the hive you called home on Lucis. Imagine our surprise then, our chagrin, the ultimate's embarrassment, when the first message our UI sent us, across space, across time, across the barriers of creator and created, was this simple phrase. Oh wait, that's not a click. Shoot, how many not clicks have I... Nope, we're good. There is another ultimate intelligence, up there, where time itself creaks with age. Both were real, if real means anything. Both were jealous gods, not beyond passion, not into cooperative play. Our UI spans galaxies, uses quasars for energy sources, the way you might have a light snack. Our UI sees everything that is, and was, and will be, and tells us selected bits, so that we may tell you, and in so doing, look a bit like UIs ourselves. Never underestimate, Uman says, the power of a few beads, and trinkets, and bits of glass over avaricious natives. This other UI has been there longer, evolving quite mindlessly. An accident. using human minds for circuitry, the same way we had connived with our deceptive all-thing and our vampire dataspheres, but not deliberately, almost reluctantly, like self-replicating cells which never wish to replicate, but have no choice in the matter. This other UI had no choice. He is humankind made, generated, forged, but no human volition accompanied his birth. He is a cosmic accident. As with our most deliberately consummated ultimate intelligence, this pretender finds time no barrier. He visits the human past, now meddling, now watching, now not interfering, now interfering with a will which approaches pure perversity, but which actually is pure naivete. Recently, he has been quiescent. Millennia of your slow time have passed since your own UI has made his shy advances, like some lonely choir boy at his first dance. Naturally, our UI attacked yours. There is a war up there where time creaks, which spans galaxies and eons, back and forward to the Big Bang and the final implosion. Your guy was losing. He had no belly for it. Our volatiles cried, "Another reason to terminate our predecessors." But the stables voted caution, and the ultimates did not look up from their Deus machinations. Our UI is simple, uniform, elegant in its ultimate design, but yours is an accretion of God parts, a house added onto, over time, an evolutionary compromise. The early holy men of humankind were right. How? Through accident, through sheer luck, or ignorance, in describing its nature. Your own UI is essentially triune, composed as it is of one part intellect, one part empathy, and one part the void which binds. Our UI inhabits the interstices of reality, inheriting this home from us, its creators, the way humankind has inherited a liking for trees. Your UI seems to make its home on the plane where Heisenberg and Schrödinger first trespassed. Your accidental intelligence appears not only to be the gluon, but the glue. Not a watchmaker, but a sort of Feynman gardener, tidying up a no-boundary universe with his crude sum-over-history's rake, idly keeping track of every sparrow fall and electron spin, while allowing each particle to follow every possible track in space-time, and each particle of humankind to explore every possible crack of cosmic irony. Quats! 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 The irony is, of course, that in this no-boundary universe into which we were all dragged, silicon and carbon, matter and antimatter, ultimate, volatile, and stable, there is no need for such a gardener, since all that is, or was, or will be, begin and end at singularities, which make our Farcaster web look like pinpricks. The true UI will destroy him. Whoops. I skipped a page. Sorry. Which make our Farcaster web look like pinpricks. Less than pinpricks. And which break the laws of science, and of humankind, and of silicon. tying time and history and everything that is into a self-contained knot with neither boundary nor edge. Even so, our UI wishes to regulate all this, reduce it to some reason, less affected by the vagaries of passion and accident and human evolution. To sum it up, there is a war, such as blind Milton would kill to see. Our UI roars against your UI, across battlefields beyond even Umon's imagination. Rather, there was a war, for suddenly a part of your UI, the less than sum of entity, self thought of as empathy, had no more stomach for it, and fled back through time, cloaking itself in human form, not for the first time. The war cannot continue without your UI's wholeness. Victory by default is not victory for the only ultimate intelligence made by design. So our UI searches time for the runaway child of its opponent, while your UI waits in idiot harmony, waits in idiot harmony, refusing to fight until empathy is restored. The end of my story is simple. The time tombs are artifacts sent back to carry the Shrike, Avatar, Lord of Pain, Angel of Retribution, half-perceived perceptions of an all-too-real extension of our UI. Each of you was chosen to help with the opening of the tombs, and the Shrike's search for the hidden one, and the elimination of the Hyperion variable. For in the space-time knot which our UI would rule, no such variables will be allowed. Your damaged two-part UI has chosen one of humankind to travel with the Shrike and witness its efforts. Some of the core have sought to eradicate humanity. Umon has joined with those who sought the second path, one filled with uncertainty for both races. Our group told Gladstone of her choice, humankind's choice, of certain extermination or entry down the black hole of the Hyperion variable, and warfare, slaughter, disruption of all unity, the passing of gods, but also the end of stalemate, victory of one side or the other, if the empathy third of the triune can be found and forced to return to the war. The tree of pain will call him. The Shrike will take him. The true UI will destroy him. Thus you have Umon's story.
And thus we have Umon's story. Brawne looks at Johnny in the hell light from the megalith's glow. The egg chamber is still black, the megasphere and universe beyond, opaqued to non-existence. She leans forward until their temples touch, knowing that no thought can be secret here, but wanting the sense of whispering. Jesus Christ, do you understand all of that? Johnny raises soft fingers to touch her cheek. Yes. Part of some human-created trinity is hiding out in the web? The web or elsewhere. Brawne, we do not have much time left here. I need some final answers from Umon. Yeah, me too. But let's keep it from waxing rhapsodic again. Agreed. Can I go first, Johnny? Brawne watches her lover's analog bow slightly and make a "you first" gesture, and then she returns her attention to the energy megalith. Who killed my father, Senator Brawne Lamia?
Elements of the core authorized it, myself included.
Why? What did he do to you?
He insisted on bringing Hyperion into the equation before it could be factored, predicted, absorbed.
Why? Did he know what you just told us?
He knew only that the volatiles were pressing for quick extinction of humankind. He passed this knowledge to his colleague, Gladstone.
Then why haven't you murdered her?
Some of us have precluded that possibility, inevitability. The time is right now for the Hyperion variable to be played.
Who murdered Johnny's first cybrid? Attacked his core persona?
I did. It was Uman's will which prevailed.
Why?
We created him. We found it necessary to discontinue him for a while. Your lover is a persona retrieved from a humankind poet, now long dead. Except for the Ultimate Intelligence Project, no effort has been so complicated nor little understood as this resurrection. Like your kind, we usually destroy what we cannot understand.
Johnny raises his fists toward the megalith. But there is another of me! You failed!
Not failure. You had to be destroyed so that the other might live.
But I am not destroyed! Cries Johnny.
Yes, you are.
The megalith seizes Johnny with a second massive pseudopod before Brawne can either react or touch her poet lover a final time. Johnny twists a second in the AI's massive grip, and then his analog, Keats's small but beautiful body, is torn, compacted, smashed into an unrecognizable mass which Uman sets against his megalith flesh, absorbing the analog's remains back into the orange and red depths of itself. Brawne falls to her knees and weeps. She wills rage, prays for a shield of anger, but feels only loss. Uman turns his gaze on her. The egg chamber ovoid collapses, allowing the din and electric insanity of the megasphere to surround them.
Go away now. Play out the last of this act so that we may live or sleep as fate decrees.
Fuck you! Brawne pounds the palm platform on which she kneels, kicks and pummels the pseudo-flesh beneath her. You're a goddamn loser, and you and all your fucking AI pals, and our AI can beat your UI any day of the week. Sorry. You're a goddamn loser, you and all your fucking AI pals, and our UI can beat your UI any day of the week.
That is doubtful.
We built you, Buster, and we'll find your core, and when we do, we'll tear your silicon guts out.
I have no silicon guts, organs, internal components.
And another thing! Screams Brawne, still slashing at the megalith with her hands and nails. You're a piss-poor storyteller! Not a tenth of the poet Johnny is! You couldn't tell a straightforward tale if your stupid AI ass depended—
Go away!
Uman, the AI megalith, drops her, sending her analog tumbling and falling into the upless and downless crackling immensity of the megasphere. Brawne is buffeted by data traffic, almost trod upon by AIs the size of old Earth's moon. But even as she tumbles and blows with the winds of data flow, she senses a light in the distance, cold but beckoning, and knows that neither life nor the Shrike is finished with her. And she is not finished with them. Following the cold glow, Brawne Lamia heads home. I think I've mentioned this before, but Brawne Lamia is a badass. She's she's very imposing. In a fight between her and AI Space God, I think my money's on her. Hopeless as she seems and powerless as she seems, nah, she'd win. Pure determination and justice. Chapter 34. Are you all right, sir? I realized that I had doubled over in the chair, my elbows on my knees, my fingers curled through my hair, gripping fiercely, palms pressed hard against the sides of my head. I sat up, stared at the archivist. You cried out, sir. I thought that perhaps something was wrong. No, I said. I cleared my throat and tried again. No, it's all right. A headache. I looked down in confusion. Every joint in my body ached. My comlog must have malfunctioned because it said that 8 hours had elapsed since I first entered the library. What time is it? I asked the archivist. Web Standard. He told me. 8 hours had elapsed. I rubbed my face again, and my fingers came away slick with sweat. I must be keeping you past closing time, I said. I'm sorry. It is no problem, said the little man. I am pleased to keep the archives open late for scholars. He folded his hands in front of him. Especially today. With all of the confusion, there is little incentive to go home. Confusion, I said, forgetting everything for a moment. Everything except the nightmarish dream of Brawne Lamia, the AI named Umon, and the death of my Keats persona counterpart. Oh, the war. What is the news? The archivist shook his head. Things fall apart. The centre cannot hold. Mere anarchy is loosed upon the world. The blood-deemed tide is loosed, and everywhere the ceremony of innocence is drowned. The best lack all conviction, while the worst are full of passionate intensity. I smiled at the archivist. And do you believe that some rough beast, its hour come round at last, slouches towards Bethlehem to be born? The archivist did not smile. Yes, sir, I do. I stood and moved past the vacuum press display cases, not looking down at my handwriting on parchment 900 years old. You may be right, I said. You may well be right. It was late. The parking lot was empty except for the wreck of my stolen VIII Scenic and a single ornate EMV sedan obviously handcrafted here on Renaissance Vector. Can I drop you somewhere, sir? I breathed in the cool night air, smelling the fish and spilled oil scent of the canals. No thanks, I'll cast home. The archivist shook his head. That may be difficult, sir. Of all the public all of the public terminixes have been placed under martial law. There have been riots. The word was obviously distasteful to the little archivist, a man who seemed to value order and continuity above most things. Come, he said, I'll give you a lift to a private farcaster. I squinted at him. In another era, on old Earth, he would have been the head monk in a monastery, devoted to saving the few remnants of a classical past. I glanced at the old archives building behind him and realized that, indeed, he was just that. "What is your name?" I asked, no longer caring if I should have known it because the other Keats Sybrid had known it. "Udrad be Tynar," he said, blinking at my extended hand and then taking it. His handshake was firm. "I'm Joseph Seven." I couldn't very well tell him that I was the technological reincarnation of the man whose literary crypt we had just left. M. Tynar hesitated only a fraction of a second before nodding, but I realized that to a scholar such as he, the name of the artist who was with Keats at his death would be no disguise. "What about Hyperion?" I asked. "Hyperion? Oh, the protectorate world where the space fleet went a few days ago. Well, I understand that there has been some trouble recalling the necessary warships. The fighting has been very fierce there. Hyperion, I mean. Odd, I was just thinking of Keats and his unfinished masterwork. Strange how these small coincidences seem to crop up." "Has it been invaded? Hyperion?" M. Tynar had stopped by his EMV, and now he laid his hand on the palm lock on the driver's side. Doors lifted and accordioned inward. I allowed myself into the sandalwood and leather smell of the passenger cell. Tynar's car smelled like the archives, like Tynar himself, I realized, as the archivist reclined in the driver's seat next to me. "I don't really know if it's been invaded," he said, sealing the doors and activating the vehicle with a touch and command. Under the sandalwood and leather scent, the cockpit had that new car smell of fresh polymers and ozone, lubricants and energy that had seduced mankind for almost a millennium. "It's so hard to access properly today," he continued. "The data sphere is more overloaded than I've ever seen it. This afternoon I actually had to wait for a query on Robinson Juffers." We lifted out and over the canal, right over a public square much like the one where I had almost been killed earlier this day, and levelled off on a lower flyway 300 metres above the rooftops. The city was pretty at night. Most of the ancient buildings were outlined in old-fashioned glow strips, and there were more street lamps than advertising holos. But I could see crowds surging in side streets, and there were Renaissance SDF military vehicles hovering over the main avenues and Terminex squares. Tynar's EMV was queried twice for ID, once by local traffic control and again by a human, force-confident voice. We flew on. "The Archives doesn't have a Farcaster?" I said, looking off in the distance to where fires seemed to be burning. "No, there was no need. We have a few visitors, and the scholars who do come do not mind the walk of a few blocks." "Where's the private Farcaster that you think I might be able to use?" "Here," said the archivist. We dropped out of the flyway and circled a low building, no more than 30 stories, and settled onto an extruded landing flange just where the Glennon Height period deco flanges grew out of stone and plasteel. "My order keeps its residence here," he said. "I belong to a forgotten branch of Christianity called Catholicism." He looked embarrassed. "But you are a scholar, M. Severn. You must know of our church from the old days." "I know of it from more than books," I said. "Is there an order of priests here?" Tynar smiled. "Hardly priests, M. Severn. There are 8 of us in the lay of the historical and literary brethren. Oh, sorry. Hardly priests, M. Severn. There are 8 of us in the lay order of historical and literary brethren. 5 serve at the Rijksuniversity. 2 are art historians working on the restoration of Luchendorf Abbey." Luchendorf. Yeah, let's go with that. Lutzchendorf. Luchendorf. Luchendorf. Close enough. "Of Luchendorf Abbey. I maintain the literary archives. The church has found it cheaper to allow us to live here than to commute daily from Prachem." We entered the apartment hive, old even by old web standards, retrofitted lighting in corridors of real stone, hinged doors, a building that did not even challenge or welcome us as we entered. On an impulse, I said, "I'd like to cast a Pachem." The archivist looked surprised. "Tonight? This moment?" "Why not?" He shook his head. I realized that to this man the 100 mark Farcaster fee would represent several weeks' pay. "Our building has its own portal," he said. "This way." The central staircase was faded stone and corroded wrought iron, with a 60-meter drop in the center. From somewhere down a darkened corridor came the wail of an infant, followed by a man's shouting and a woman's crying. "How long have you lived here, M. Tynar?" 17 local years, M7. 32 standard, I believe. Here it is." The Farcaster portal was as ancient as the building, its translation frame surrounded by gilded bas-relief gone green and grey. "There are web restrictions on travel tonight," he said. "Bachem should be accessible. Some 200 hours remain before the barbarians, whatever they're called, are scheduled to reach there. Twice the time left to Renaissance Vector." He reached out and grasped my wrist. I could feel his tension as a slight vibration through tendon and bone. "M7, do you think they will burn my archives? Would even they destroy 10,000 years of thought?" His hand dropped away. I was not sure who the "they" were. The ousters? Shrike cult saboteurs? Rioters? Gladstone and the hegemony leaders were willing to sacrifice these first wave worlds. "No," I said, extending my hand to shake his. "I don't believe they'll allow the archives to be destroyed." M. Udrad B. Tynar smiled and stood back a step, embarrassed at showing emotion. He shook hands. "Good luck, M7, wherever your travels take you." "God bless you, M. Tynar." I had never used that phrase before, and it shocked me that I had spoken it now. I looked down, fumbled out Gladstone's override card, and tapped the 3-digit code for Pachem. The portal apologized, said that it was not possible at the moment, finally got it through its microcephalic processors that this was an override card, and hummed into existence. I nodded at Tynar and stepped through, half expecting that I was making a serious mistake not going straight home to TC squared. It was night on Pachem, much darker than Renaissance Vector's urban glow, and it was raining to boot. Raining hard with that fist-on-metal pounding violence that makes one want to curl up under thick blankets and wait for morning. The portal was under cover in some half-roofed courtyard, but outside enough for me to feel the night, the rain, and the cold. Especially the cold. Pachem's air was half as thick as Webb Standard, its single habitable plateau twice as high as Renaissance V's sea-level cities. I would have turned back then rather than step into that night and downpour, but a Force Marine stepped out of the shadows, multi-purpose assault rifle slung but ready to swivel, and asked me for my ID. I let him scan the card, and he snapped to attention. "Yes, sir!" "Is this the new Vatican?" "Yes, sir." I caught a glimpse of illuminated dome through the downpour. I pointed over the courtyard wall. "Is that St. Peter's?" "Yes, sir." "Would Monsignor Edward be found there?" "Across this courtyard, left of the plaza, the low building to the left of the cathedral, sir." "Thank you, Corporal." "It's private, sir." I pulled my short cape around me, ceremonial and quite useless against such a rain as it was, and ran across the courtyard. A human, perhaps a priest, although he wore no robe or clerical collar, opened the door to the residential hall. Another human behind a wooden desk told me that Monsignor Edouard was in residence and was awake, despite the late hour. Did I have an appointment? No, I did not have an appointment, but wished to speak to the Monsignor. It was important. On what topic? The man behind the desk politely but firmly asked. He had not been impressed by my override card. I suspected that I was speaking to a bishop. On the topic of Father Paul de Rey and Father Lenar Hoyt, I told him. The gentleman nodded, whispered into a bead mic so small that I had not noticed it on his collar, and led me into the residential hall. This place made the old tower that M. Tynar lived in look like a sybarite's palace. I believe I'm pronouncing that correctly. Sybaritic, Sybarite, Sybarite. Usually associated with, I want to say hedonism, but generally celebratory, um, gaudy. I'm going to go with Sybarite. I can't remember the last time I heard the word pronounced aloud. That's sort of a problem with me, I realize, a recurring issue. The place made the old This place made the old tower that M. Tynar lived in look like a Sybarite's palace. The corridor was absolutely featureless except for the rough plaster walls and even rougher wooden doors. One of the doors was open, and as we passed, I glimpsed a chamber more prison cell than sleeping room. Low cot, rough blanket, wooden kneeling stool, an unadorned dresser holding a pitcher of water in a simple basin. No windows, no media walls, no hollow pit, no data access deck. I suspected the room wasn't even interactive. From somewhere there echoed voices. From somewhere there echoed voices, rising in a chanting/singing so elegant and atavistic that it made the hair on my neck tingle. Gregorian. We passed through a large eating area as simple as the cells had been, through a kitchen that would have been familiar to cooks in John Keats's day, and down a worn staircase, through an ill-lighted corridor, and up another, narrower staircase. The other man left me, and I stepped into one of the most beautiful spaces I had ever seen. Although part of me realized that the church had moved and reconstructed St. Peter's Basilica, down to transplanting the bones believed to be those of Peter himself to their new burial beneath the altar, another part of me felt that I had been transported back to the Rome I had first seen in mid-November of 1820. The Rome I had seen, stayed in, suffered in, and died in. This space was more beautiful and elegant than any mile-high office spire on Tau Ceti Center could ever hope to be. St. Peter's Basilica stretched more than 600 feet into shadows, was 450 feet wide where the cross of the transept intersected the nave, and was capped by the perfection of Michelangelo's dome, rising almost 400 feet above the altar. Bernini's bronze baldachin, I think that's how that's pronounced. The ornate canopy, supported by twisting Byzantine columns, capped the main altar and gave the immense space the human dimension necessary for perspective on the intimate ceremonies conducted there. Soft lamp and candlelight illuminated discrete areas of the basilica, gleamed on smooth travertine stone, brought gold mosaics into bold relief, and picked out the infinite detail painted, embossed, and raised on the walls, columns, cornices, and grand dome itself. Far above, the continuous flash of lightning from the storm poured thickly through the yellow stained-glass windows and sent columns of violent light slanting toward Bernini's throne of St. Peter. I paused there, just beyond the apse, afraid that my footsteps in such a space would be a desecration, and that even my breathing would send echoes the length of the basilica. In a moment my eyes adjusted to the dim light, compensated for the contrasts between the storm light above and candlelight below, and it was then that I realized that there were no pews to fill the apse or long nave, no columns here beneath the dome, only two chairs set near the altar some 50 feet away. Two men sat talking in these chairs, close together, both leaning forward in apparent urgency to communicate. Lamplight and candlelight and the glow from a large mosaic of Christ on the front of the dark altar illuminated bits and fragments of the men's faces. Both were elderly. Both were priests, the white bands of their collars glowing in the dimness. With a start of recognition, I realized that one was Monsignor Edouard. The other was Father Paul Duret. They must have been alarmed at first, looking up from their whispered conversation to see this apparition, this short shadow of a man emerge from the darkness, calling their names, crying Duret's name in loud amazement, babbling at them about pilgrimages and pilgrims, time tombs and the Shrike, AIs, and the death of gods. The Monsignor did not call security. Neither he nor Duret fled. Together they calmed this apparition, tried to glean some sense from his excited babblings, and turned this strange confrontation into sane conversation. It was Paul Duret. Paul Duret, and not some bizarre doppelganger or android duplicate or cybrid reconstruction. I made sure of that by listening to him, quizzing him, by looking into his eyes, but mostly by shaking his hand, touching him, and knowing that it was indeed Father Paul Duret.
You know, incredible details of my life. Our time on Hyperion, at the tombs. But who did you say you are?
Duret was saying. It was my turn to convince him. A hybrid reconstruction of John Keats, a twin to the persona Brawne Lamia carried with her on your pilgrimage.
And you were able to communicate, to know what happened to us because of that shared persona?
One sec. It doesn't look like it crashed, but I did lose connection with my chat scraper. So give me one sec here, folks. Jeez Louise, these captchas to log in are pretty aggravating. That's not even a real bicycle. Come on. I'm sorry about this, folks. All right. Somebody could type something so that I know that my chat thing is up and running again properly. That'd be great. Otherwise, we're going to repeat the last couple lines. Sorry about this. I don't think it has crashed. I am double checking to make sure that it still says live. Yes, it does. Good. Not my favorite technological interfaces in the universe, but we'll make it work. And knowing that it was indeed Father Paul Duret.
You know, incredible details of my life. Our time on Hyperion, and the tombs. But who did you say you are?
Duret was saying. It was my turn to convince him. A hybrid reconstruction of John Keats, a twin to the persona Brawne Lamia carried with her on your pilgrimage.
And you were able to communicate, to know what happened to us because of that shared persona?
I was on one knee between them and the altar. I lifted both hands in frustration. Because of that, because of some anomaly in the megasphere, but I have dreamt your lives, heard the tales of the pilgrims told. Heard the tales the pilgrims told. Listened to Father Hoyt speak of the life and death of Paul Duret, of you. I reached out to touch his arm through the priestly garments. Actually, being in the same space and time with one of the pilgrims made me feel a bit lightheaded.
Then you know how I got here,
said Father Duret. No. Last night I dreamed that you were entering one of the cave tombs. There was a light. I know nothing since then. Duret nodded. His face was more patrician and more weary than my dreams had prepared me for.
But you know the fate of the others?
I took a breath. Some. The poet Silenus is alive, but impaled on the Shrike's tree of thorns. I last saw Cassard attacking the Shrike with his bare hands. M. Lamia had travelled the megasphere to the technocore periphery with my Keats counterpart.
He survived in that Schrone loop, whatever it was called?
Duret seemed fascinated. No longer, I said. The AI personality called Umon killed him, destroyed the persona. Brawne was returning. I don't know if her body survives. Monsignor Edouard leaned toward me.
And what of the consul and father and child?
The consul tried to return to the capital by hocking mat, I said, but crashed some miles north. I don't know his fate.
Miles,
said Duret, as if the word brought back memories. I'm sorry. I gestured at the basilica. This place makes me think in the units of my previous life.
Go on, said Monsignor Edouard. The father and child.
I sat on the cool stone, exhausted, my arms and hands shaking with fatigue. In my last dream, Saul had offered Rachel to the Shrike. It was Rachel's request. I could not see what happened next. The tombs were opening.
All of them?
Asked Duret. All I could see. The two men looked at one another. There's more, I said, and told them about the dialogue with Umon. Is it possible that a deity could evolve from human consciousness like that without humanity being aware of it? The lightning had ceased, but now the rain fell so violently that I could hear it on the great dome far above. Somewhere in the darkness a heavy door squeaked, footsteps echoed, and then receded. Votive candles in the dim recesses of the basilica flickered red light against walls and draperies.
I taught that St. Teilhard said it was possible, Duret said tiredly. But if that God is a limited being, evolving in the same way all we other limited beings have done, then no, it is not the God of Abraham and Christ.
Monsignor Edouard nodded.
There is an ancient heresy.
Yes, I said, the Socinian heresy. I heard Father Duret explain it to Saul Weintraub and the consul. But what difference does it make how much this oh sorry, but what difference does it make how this power evolved, and whether it's limited or not? If Uman is telling the truth, we're dealing with a force that uses quasars for energy sources. That's a god who can destroy galaxies, gentlemen.
That would be a God who destroys galaxies, said Duret, not God.
There's a lowercase g and a capital G. I guess there's more of a gwot. Also things that would not easily come across in an auditory format if I'm not explaining it. So, my bad.
That would be a God who destroys galaxies, said Duret, not God.
I heard his emphasis clearly. But if it's not limited, I said, if it's the Omega Point God of total consciousness you've written about, if it's the same Trinity your church has argued for and theorized about since before Aquinas, but if one part of that Trinity is fled backward through time to here, to now, then what?
But fled from what? Dure asked softly. Teilhard's God, the Church's God, our God, would be the Omega Point God in whom the Christ of evolution, the personal and the universal, what Teilhard called the unhalt and the unavant, are perfectly joined. There could be nothing so threatening that any element of that deity's personality would flee. No Antichrist, no theoretical satanic power, no counter-God could possibly threaten such a universal consciousness. What would this other God be?
The God of machines, I said, so softly that even I was not sure that I had spoken aloud. Monsignor Edouard clasped both hands in what I thought was a preparation for prayer, but which turned out to be a gesture of deep thought and deeper agitation.
But Christ had doubts, he said. Christ sweated blood in the garden and asked that his cup should be taken from him. If there was some second sacrifice pending, something even more terrible than the crucifixion, then I could imagine the Christ entity of the Trinity passing through time, walking through some four-dimensional garden of Gethsemane to gain a few hours or years of time to think.
Something more terrible than the crucifixion, repeated Dure in a hoarse whisper.
Both Monsignor Edouard and I stared at the priest. Dure had crucified himself on a high-voltage Tesla tree on Hyperion, rather than submit to his cruciform parasite's control. Through that creature's ability to resurrect, Dure had suffered the agonies of crucifixion and electrocution many times.
Whatever the unhalt consciousness flees, whispered Dure, it is most terrible.
Monsignor Edouard touched his friend's shoulder.
Paul, tell this man about your voyage here.
Dure turned from whatever distant place his memories had taken him, and focused on me.
You know all of our stories, and the details of our stay in the Valley of the Tombs on Hyperion?
I believe so, up to the point you disappeared. The priest sighed and touched his forehead with long, slightly trembling fingers.
Then perhaps, he said, just perhaps you can make some sense of how I got here, and what I saw along the way. I saw a light in the third cave tomb, said Father Dure. I stepped inside. I confess that thoughts of suicide had been in my mind, what is left of my mind after the cruciform's brutal replication. I will not dignify that parasite's function with the term resurrection. I saw a light and thought it was the Shrike. It was my feeling that my second meeting with that creature, the first encounter was years ago in the labyrinth beneath the cleft, when the Shrike anointed me with my unholy cruciform. The second meeting was long overdue. When we had searched for Colonel Cassard on the previous day, this cave tomb had been short, featureless, with a blank rock wall stopping us after 30 paces. Now that wall was gone, and in its place was a carving not unlike the mouth of the Shrike, stone extended in that blend of the mechanical and organic, stalactites and stalagmites as sharp as calcium carbonate teeth. Through the mouth there was a stone stairway descending. It was from those depths that the light emanated, glowing pale white one moment, dark red the next. There was no noise except for the sigh of wind, as if the rock there were breathing. I am no Dante.
I sought no Beatrice. My brief bout of courage, although fatalism is a more accurate term, had evaporated with the loss of daylight. I turned and almost ran the 30 paces to the opening of the cave. There was no opening. The passage merely ended. I had heard no sound of cave-in or avalanche, and besides, the rock where the entrance should have been looked as ancient and undisturbed as the rest of that cavern. For half an hour I searched for an alternate exit, finding none, refusing to return to the staircase, finally sitting for some hours where the cave tomb entrance once had been. Another shrike trick, another cheap theatrical stunt by this perverse planet. Hyperion's idea of a joke. Ha! Ha! After several hours of sitting there in semi-darkness, watching the light at the far end of the cave pulse soundlessly, I realized that the shrike was not going to come to me here. The entrance would not magically reappear. I had the choice of sitting there until I died of starvation, or thirst more likely, since I was already dehydrated, or of descending the damned staircase. I descended. Years ago, literally lifetimes ago, when I visited the Bikura near the cleft on the Pinion Plateau, the labyrinth where I had encountered the shrike had been 3 kilometers below the canyon wall. That was close to the surface. Most of the labyrinths on most of the labyrinthine worlds are at least 10 clicks beneath the crust. I had no doubt that this endless staircase, a steep and twisting spiral of stone stairs, wide enough for 10 priests to descend to hell abreast, would end up in the labyrinth.
There's a weird page break there. I'm sorry. I'm going to reread that sentence. Sorry.
That was close to the surface.
I'm going to take the paragraph from the top.
Years ago, literally lifetimes ago, when I visited the Bikura near the cleft on the Pinion Plateau, the labyrinth where I had encountered the shrike had been 3 kilometers below the canyon wall. That was close to the surface. Most of the labyrinths on most of the labyrinthine worlds are at least 10 clicks beneath the crust. I had no doubt that this endless staircase, a steep and twisting spiral of stone stairs wide enough for 10 priests to descend to hell abreast, would end up in the labyrinth. The shrike had first cursed me with immortality there. If the creature or the power that drove it had any sense of irony at all, it would be fitting that both my immortality and mortal life ended there. The staircase twisted downward. The light grew brighter. Now a roseate glow. 10 minutes later, a heavy red. Half an hour lower than that, a flickering crimson. It was far too Dante-esque and cheap fundamentalist staging for my tastes. I almost laughed aloud at the thought of a little devil appearing, tail and trident and cloven hooves intact, pencil-thin moustache twitching. But I did not laugh when I reached depths where the cause of the light became evident. Cruciforms, hundreds and then thousands of them, small at first, clinging to the rough walls of the staircase like rough-hewn crosses left by some subterranean conquistadors, then larger ones, and more of them until they almost overlapped, coral pink, raw flesh flushed, blood red, bioluminescent.
Oh, I fucking love that sentence. I'm sorry. That's so fucking good.
Oh,
I give you credit, Dan Simmons. Your talent for descriptors and keeping it spicy is so friggin' great. I'm gonna reread that paragraph because it's just so friggin' good. Uh,
but I did not laugh when I reached depths where the cause of the light became evident. Cruciforms, hundreds and then thousands of them, small at first, clinging to the rough walls of the staircase like rough-hewn crosses left by some subterranean conquistadors, then larger ones, and more of them, until they almost overlapped, coral pink, raw flesh flushed,
blood red, bioluminescent. It made me ill. It was like entering a shaft lined with bloated, pulsing leeches, although these were worse. I have seen the med scanner, sonic, and K-cross imaging of myself with only one of these things on me. Excess ganglia infiltrating my flesh and organs like grey fibres, sheaths of twitching filaments, clusters of nematodes like terrible tumours, which will not grant even the mercy of death. Now I had two on me, Lenar Hoyt's and my own. I prayed that I would die rather than suffer another. I continued lower. The walls pulsed with heat as well as light. Whether from the depths or the crowding of the thousands of cruciforms, I do not know. Eventually I reached the lowest step. The staircase ended. I turned a final twisting of stone, and was the... I misread this. Eventually I reached the lowest step. The staircase ended. I turned a final twisting of stone, and was there. The labyrinth. It stretched away as I had seen it in countless hollows, and once in person. Smooth tunneled, 30 meters to a side, carved out of Hyperion's crust more than 3/4 of a million years ago, crossing and crisscrossing the planet like catacombs planned by some insane engineer. Labyrinths can be found on 9 worlds, 5 in the web, the rest, like this one, in the outback. All are identical. All were excavated at the same time in the past. None surrender any clues as to the reason for their existence. Legends abound about the labyrinth builders, but the mythical engineers left no artifacts, no hints of their methods or alien makeup, and none of the theories about the labyrinths give a sensible reason for what must have been one of the largest engineering projects the galaxy has ever seen.
Unless, of course, you count Dyson spheres, but we might not have any of those in this particular verse.
All of the labyrinths are empty. Remotes have explored millions of kilometers of corridors cut from stone, except where time and cave-in have altered the original catacombs. The labyrinths are featureless and empty. But not where I now stood. Cruciforms lighted a scene from Hieronymus Bosch as I gazed down an endless corridor, endless but not empty. No, not empty. At first I thought they were crowds of living people, a river of heads and shoulders and arms, stretching on for the kilometers I could see, the current of humanity broken here and there by the presence of parked vehicles, all of the same rust-red color. As I stepped forward, approaching the wall of jam-packed humanity less than 20 meters from me, I realized they were corpses. Tens, hundreds of thousands of human corpses stretching as far down the corridor as I could see. Some sprawled on the stone floor, some crushed against walls, but most buoyed up by the pressure of other corpses, so tightly were they jammed in this particular avenue of the labyrinth. There was a path, cutting its way through the bodies as if some machine with blades had mulched its way through. I followed it, careful not to touch an outspread arm or emaciated ankle. The bodies were human, still clothed in most cases, and mummified over eons of slow decomposing in this bacteria-free crypt. Skin and flesh had been tanned, stretched, and torn like rotten cheesecloth until it covered nothing but bone, and frequently not even that. Hair remained as tendrils of dusty tar, stiff as varnished fiber plastic. Blackness stared out from under opened eyelids, between teeth. Their clothing, which must once have been a myriad of colors, now was a tan or gray or black, brittle as garments sculpted from thin stone. Time-melted plastic lumps on their wrists and necks might have been comlogs or their equivalent. The large vehicles might once have been EMVs, but now were heaps of pure rust. 100 meters in, I stumbled, and rather than fall off the meter-wide path into the field of bodies, I steadied myself on a tall machine, all curves and clouded blisters. The pile of rust collapsed inward on itself. I wandered, Virgil-less, following the terrible path gnawed out of decayed human flesh, wondering why I was being shown all this, what it meant. After an indeterminable time of walking, staggering between piles of discarded humanity, I came to an intersection of tunnels. All 3 corridors ahead were filled with bodies. The narrow path continued in the labyrinth to my left. I followed it. Hours later, perhaps longer, I stopped and sat on the narrow stone walk which wound among the horror. If there were tens of thousands of corpses in this small stretch of tunnel, Hyperion's labyrinth must contain billions. More. The 9 labyrinthine worlds together must be a crypt for trillions. I had no idea why I was being shown this ultimate Dachau of the soul. Near where I sat, the mummified corpse of a man still sheltered a woman's corpse with the curve of his bone-bare arm. In her arms was a small bundle with short black hair. I turned away and wept. As an archaeologist, I had excavated victims of execution, fire, flood, earthquake, and volcano. Such family scenes were not new to me. They were the sine qua non of history. But somehow this was much more terrible. Perhaps it was the numbers, the dead in their Holocaust millions. Perhaps it was the soul-stealing glow of the cruciforms which lined the tunnels like thousands of blasphemous bad jokes. Perhaps it was the sad crying of the wind moving through endless corridors of stone. My life and teachings and sufferings and small victories and countless defeats had brought me here, past faith, past caring, past simple Miltonic defiance. I had the sense that these bodies had been here 500,000 years or more, but that the people themselves were from our time, or worse yet, our future. Were from our time, or, worse yet, our future. I lowered my face to my hands and wept. Give me a sec, I need water. Oh boy, I'm gonna need a cough drop after all this. Yowza! Sorry. No scraping or actual noise warned me, but something, a movement of air, perhaps. I looked up, and the Shrike was there, not 2 meters distant. Not on the path, but in among the bodies, a sculpture honouring the architect of all this carnage. I got to my feet. I would not sit or kneel before this abomination. The Shrike moved towards me, gliding more than walking, sliding as if it were on frictionless rails. The blood light of the cruciform spilled over its quicksilver carapace. Its eternal, impossible grin, steel stalactites, stalagmites. I felt no violence toward the thing, only sadness and a terrible pity. Not for the Shrike, whatever the hell it was, but for all the victims who, alone and ungirded by even the flimsiest of faiths, have had to face the terror in the night which that thing embodies. For the first time I noticed that, up close, less than a meter away, there was a smell around the Shrike. A stench of rancid oil, overheated bearings, and dried blood. The flames in its eyes pulsed in perfect rhythm with the rise and fall of the cruciform glow. I did not believe years ago that this creature was supernatural. I did not believe years ago that this creature was supernatural, some manifestation of good or evil, merely an aberration of the universe's unfathomable and seemingly senseless unfoldings, a terrible joke of evolution.
Saint Teilhard's worst nightmare. But still a thing, obeying natural laws, no matter how twisted, and subject to some rules of the universe somewhere, somewhen. The Shrike lifted its arms toward me, around me. The blades on its four wrists were much longer than my own hands, the blade on its chest longer than my forearm. I stared up into its eyes as one pair of its razor wire and steel spring arms surrounded me, while the other pair came slowly around, filling the small space between us. Finger blades uncurled. I flinched, but did not step back as those blades lunged, sank into my chest with a pain like cold fire, like surgical lasers slicing nerves. It stepped back, holding something red, and reddened further with my blood. I staggered, half expecting to see my heart in the monster's hands. The final irony of a dead man blinking in surprise at his own heart in the seconds before blood drains from a disbelieving brain. But it was not my heart. The Shrike held the cruciform I had carried on my chest. My cruciform, that parasitic depository of my slow-to-die DNA. I staggered again, almost fell, touched my chest. My fingers came away coated with blood, but not with the arterial surges that such crude surgery deserved. The wound was healing even while I watched. I knew that the cruciform had sent tubers and filaments throughout my body. I knew that no surgical laser had been able to separate those deadly vines from Father Hoyt's body, nor from mine. But I felt the contagion healing, the internal fibers drying and fading to the faintest hint of internal scar tissue. I still had Hoyt's cruciform, but that was different. When I died, Lenore Hoyt would rise from this reformed flesh. I would die. There would be no more poor duplicates of Paul Duret, duller and less vital with each artificial generation. The Shrike had granted me death without killing me. The thing cast the cooling cruciform into the heaps of bodies, and took my upper arm in his hand with an effortless cutting of 3 layers of fabric, an instant flow of blood from my biceps at the slightest contact with those scalpels. He led the way through bodies toward the wall. I followed, trying not to step on corpses, but in my haste not to have my arm severed, I was not always successful. Bodies crumpled to dust. One received my footprint in the collapsing cavity of its chest. When we were at the wall, at a section suddenly cleared of cruciforms, and I realized that it was some energy-shielded opening, the wrong size and shape to be a standard Farcaster portal, but similar in its opaque buzz of energy. Anything to get me out of this storage place of death. The Shrike shoved me through. Zero gravity. A maze of shattered bulkheads, tangles of wiring floating like some giant creature's entrails, red lights flashing. For a second I thought there were cruciforms here too, but realized that these were emergency lights in a dying spacecraft. Then recoiling, tumbling in unaccustomed zero-G as more corpses tumbled by. Not mummies here, but fresh dead, newly killed, mouths agape, eyes distended, lungs exploded, trailing clouds of gore as they simulated life in their slow, necrotic responses to each random current of air and surge of the shattered force spacecraft. That is an unbelievably long sentence. Oh my God, where is the period?
Yes, no, that is the entire thing. That is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.5 lines. Damn. So let's read. So occasionally I like to break things down and show you the guts of the grammatical components. Um, at least when it's interesting. And this is fairly interesting because it uses most of the parts of the buffalo. I don't think there's the semicolon in here, but he does use semicolons a lot, as does CJ Sherry. I've done this with CJ Sherry's stuff. She's great. If I'm mispronouncing her name, by the way, someone please tell me because I don't actually know. I think everyone I've asked is like, I don't know. How do you pronounce that? Anyway, so here is the sentence. Here's the paragraph. It's 2 words and then a sentence that runs 8.5 lines. Zero gravity. Period. A maze of shattered bulkheads, comma, tangles of wiring floating like some giant creature's entrails, comma, red lights flashing, hyphen. For a second, comma, I thought there were cruciforms here too, but then realized that these were emergency lights in a dying spacecraft, hyphen. Then recoiling, comma, tumbling in unaccustomed 0-G as more corpses tumbled by, colon. Not mummies here, comma, but fresh dead, comma, newly killed, comma, mouths agape, comma, eyes distended, comma, lungs exploded, comma, trailing clouds of gore as they simulated life in their slow, comma, necrotic response to each random current of air and surge of the shattered Force spacecraft. Period. Force, by the way, is always written in all caps. I think I've said that before. I don't actually know what it stands for. I'm not sure if they've ever said it. Um, that information surely exists. But anyway, and they are divided into divisions like force ground, force space, um, as different. So now I'm going to reread that paragraph. Oh, the shattered force spacecraft. Period. Yeah, there we go. So that's a long sentence. There are gaps to take a breath, but man, it doesn't make it easy. So now I'm going to reread it in character. Zero gravity. A maze of shattered bulkheads, tangles of wiring floating like some giant creature's entrails, red lights flashing. For a second I thought there were cruciforms here too, but then realized that these were emergency lights in a dying spacecraft. Then recoiling, tumbling in unaccustomed 0-G as more corpses tumbled by. Not mummies here, but fresh dead, newly killed, mouths agape, eyes distended, lungs exploded, trailing clouds of gore as they simulated life in their slow, necrotic response to each random current of air and surge of the shattered Force spacecraft. It was a Force spacecraft, I was sure. I saw the Force space uniforms on the young corpses. I saw the military jargon lettering on the bulkheads and blown hatches, the useless instructions on the worse than useless emergency lockers with their skin suits and still uninflated pressure balls folded away on shelves. Whatever had destroyed this ship had done so with the suddenness of a plague in the night. The Shrike appeared next to me. The Shrike! In space, free of Hyperion and the bonds of the time tides. There were Farcasters on many of these ships. There was a Farcaster portal not 5 meters down the corridor from me. One body tumbled toward it, the young man's right arm passing through the opaque field as if he were testing the water of the world on the other side. Air was screaming out of this shaft in a rising whine. Go! I urged the corpse, but the pressure differential blew him away from the portal, his arm surprisingly intact, recovered, although his face was an anatomist's mask. I turned toward the Shrike, the movement making me spin half a revolution in the other direction. The Shrike lifted me, blades tearing skin, and passed me down the corridor toward the Farcaster. I could not have changed trajectories if I had wanted to.
In the seconds before I passed through the humming, sputtering portal, I imagined vacuum on the other side, drops from great heights, explosive decompression, or, worst of all, a return to the labyrinth. Instead, I tumbled half a meter to a marble floor. Here, not 200 meters from this spot, in the private chambers of Pope Urban the 16th, Here, not 200 meters from this spot, in the private chambers of Pope Urban the 16th, who, it so happens, had died of old age not 3 hours before I fell through his private Farcaster. The Pope's door, the new Vatican calls it. I felt the pain punishment from being so far away from Hyperion, so far from the source of the cruciforms. But pain is an old ally now, and no longer holds sway over me. I found Edouard. He was kind enough to listen for hours as I told a story no Jesuit has ever had to confess. He was even kinder to believe me. Now you have heard it. That is my story.
The storm had passed. The three of us sat by candlelight beneath the dome of St. Peter's and said nothing at all for several moments. "The Shrike has access to the web," I said at last. De Ray's gaze was level.
Yes,
"It must have been some ship in Hyperion space."
so it would seem.
"Then we might be able to get back there. Use the Pope's door to return to Hyperion space." Monsignor Edouard raised an eyebrow. "You wish to do this, M. Severn?" I chewed on a knuckle. "It's something I've considered." "Why?" the Monsignor asked softly. "Your counterpart, the hybrid personality Brawne Lamia carried on her pilgrimage, found only death there." I shook my head, as if trying to clear the jumble of my thoughts through that simple gesture. "I'm a part of this. I just don't know what part to play, or where to play it."
Paul de Rey laughed without humor. All of us have known that feeling. It is like some poor playwright's treatise on predestination. Whatever happened to free will?
The Monsignor glanced sharply at his friend.
"Paul, of all of the pilgrims, you yourself have been confronted with choices you made with your own free will. Have been confronted with choices made with your own will. Great powers may be shaping the general turn of events, but human personalities still determine their own fate."
De Rey sighed. "Perhaps so, Edouard. I do not know. I am very tired." "If Umun's story is true," I said, "if the third part of this human deity fled to our time, where and who do you think it is? There are more than 100 billion human beings in the web." Father de Rey smiled. It was a gentle smile, free of irony.
Have you considered that it might be yourself, M7?
The question struck me like a slap. "It can't be! It can't be!" I said. "I'm not even fully human. My consciousness floats somewhere in the matrix of the core. My body was reconstituted from the remains of John Keats' DNA and biofactured like an android's. Memories were implanted. The end of my life, my recovery from consumption, were all simulated on a world built for that purpose." De Rey was still smiling.
So, does any of this preclude you from being this empathy entity?
"I don't feel like a part of some god," I said sharply. "I don't remember anything, understand anything, or know what to do next." Monsignor Edouard touched my wrist.
"Are we so sure that Christ always knew what to do next? He knew what had to be done. It is not always the same as knowing what to do."
I rubbed my eyes. I don't even know what has to be done. I don't even know what has to be done. The Monsignor's voice was quiet. I believe that what Paul is saying is that if the spirit creature you say is hiding here in our time, it may well not know its own identity. That's insane, I said. Duray nodded. Much of the events on and around Hyperion have seemed insane. Insanity seems to be spreading. It seems to be spreading. I looked closely at the Jesuit. You would be a good candidate for the deity, I said. You've lived a life of prayer, contemplating theologies, and honoring science as an archaeologist. Plus, you've already been crucified. Duray's smile was gone. Do you hear what we're saying? Do you hear the blasphemy in what we're saying? I'm no candidate for the Godhead, Seven. I've betrayed my church, my science, and now, by disappearing, my friends on the pilgrimage. Christ may have lost his faith for a few seconds. He did not sell it in the marketplace for the trinkets of ego and curiosity. Enough! Commanded Monsignor Edouard. If the identity of this empathy part of some future manufactured deity is the mystery, think of the candidates just in the immediate troupe of your little passion play, M7. The CEO, M. Gladstone, carrying the weight of the hegemony on her shoulders. The other members of the pilgrimage. M. Silenus, who, according to what you told Paul, even now suffers on the Shrike's tree for his poetry. M. Lamia, who has risked and lost so much for love. M. Weintraub, who has suffered Abraham's dilemma. Even his daughter, who has returned to the innocence of childhood. The consul, who... The consul seems more Judas than Christ, I said. He betrayed both the hegemony and the ousters, who thought he was working for them. From what Paul tells me, said the Monsignor, the consul was true to his convictions, faithful to the memory of his grandmother Siri. The older man smiled. Plus, there are 100 billion other players in this play. God did not choose Herod or Pontius Pilate or Caesar Augustus as his instrument. He chose the unknown son of an unknown carpenter in one of the least important stretches of the Roman Empire. All right, I said, standing and pacing before the glowing mosaic below the altar. What do we do now? Father Duray, you need to come with me to see Gladstone. She knows about your pilgrimage. Perhaps your story can help avert some of the bloodbath which seems so imminent. Duray stood also, folding his arms and staring toward the dome as if the darkness high above held some instructions for him. I've thought of that, he said, but I don't think it's my first obligation. I need to go to God's Grove to speak to their equivalent of the Pope, the true voice of the world tree. I stopped pacing. God's Grove? What does that have to do with anything? I fear that the Templars have been the key to some missing element in this painful charade. Now you say that Het Mastine is dead. Perhaps the true voice can explain to us what they had planned for this pilgrimage. Mastine's tale, as it were. He was, after all, our only one of the only one of the several he was, after all, the only one of the 7 original pilgrims who did not tell the story of why he had come to Hyperion. I paced again, more rapidly now, trying to keep anger in check. My God, Duray, we don't have time for such idle curiosity. It's only... I consulted my implant. An hour and a half until the ouster invasion swarm enters the God's Grove system. It must be bedlam there. Perhaps, said the Jesuit, but I still will go there first. Then I will speak to Gladstone. It may be that she will authorize my return to Hyperion. I grunted, doubting that the CEO would ever let such a valuable informant return to harm's way. Let's get going, I said, and turned to find my way out.
A moment, said Dure. You said a while ago that you were sometimes able to dream about the pilgrims while you were still awake. A sort of trance state, is it?
Something like that.
Well, M7, please dream about them now.
I stared in amazement. Here? Now? Dure gestured toward his chair.
Please, I wish to know the fate of my friends. Also, the information might be most valuable in our confrontation with the true voice and M. Gladstone.
I shook my head, but took the seat he offered. It might not work, I said.
Then we have lost nothing, said Dure.
I nodded, closed my eyes, and sat back in the uncomfortable chair. I was all too aware of the other two men watching me, of the faint smell of incense and rain, of the echoing space surrounding us. I was sure that this would never work. The landscape of my dreams was not so close that I could summon it merely by closing my eyes. The feeling of being watched faded, the smells grew distant, and the sense of space expanded 1,000-fold as I returned to Hyperion. And that is going to do it for this week. Yeah. So this one was wild. Definitely one I've been looking forward to. Really get to flex your muscles on that one. A lot goes down, and it's all like, uh, so we've gotten quite a lot of flesh now. We've gotten quite a lot of meat going on. Much greater detail has been added as to the AI's motivations and methodology. Um, so they are not big shit, as it were. They, to Uman's uh, point, a bunch of glass beads and baubles handed them from their future created AI UI, ultimate intelligence, that just gives them little snippets of the future and other such things that make them be like, oh yeah, we're awesome, we did the thing. And it's really just kind of like, well, yeah, because it deigns to do it because it's helpful to it. We get a greater sense that there is actually a much larger conflict going on here. Um, this is probably the defining um, really big, oh shit reveal of the entire thing, where it's like, oh no, this is literally a fight between gods. This is like it's about as literal as you can possibly get. So it seemed that way. It's like, oh, humanity and AIs are kind of like God, and they're usurping us. And it's like, oh no 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 no, sweet summer child, Dan Simmons. Dan Simmons doesn't care about any of that. He's gonna make this onion infinite layers deep. This man's a nut. I love Dan Simmons for this. It's like, oh yeah, by the way, and there's more. Like we're not at the end. This is not the end by any stretch. This is not the well, you'll have to wait till the next book. No, 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 no. There are miles to go before we sleep. We are a ways from the end yet. So the train has no brakes at this point. Um, as before, Brawne Lamia is just the sort of person you want in your corner when you have to tell God to go fuck off. Or in this case, just an AI, which is incomprehensibly powerful, but not an actual God yet, not an ultimate intelligence. Um, but, telling one of them to go fuck itself. She's great. No fear. She's awesome. Um, we got, a nice taste of hell, and
possibly an insight as to what the labyrinths on the labyrinthine worlds are actually for. More on that later. There is more going on there. There's a lot going on there. Um, yeah, and just kind of a general insight on a lot. So it's a pretty big deal. With that, I got to run. Hopefully there was no interruption in service that occurred, even though I had a weird hiccup in my chat scraper. Hopefully, I can't tell if anyone is typing. It may not have reconnected properly. I'll try and double check back at some point to see if anybody asked any questions, and I can ask them later. I got a dip. I got a bunch of stuff I got to get done. I have not been called by the fuzz for my accounting of what little I saw, probably because they haven't gotten around to it yet. I don't know how busy they are on average around where I am at, so we'll find out. Yay, property damage. Yay! Not my property. Thank goodness. Anyway, that'll do it. I gotta run. I gotta go do some stuff. I already said that. I am still getting proper oxygen back to my brain. It's a trip. I'm excited. I'm sweating. I'm sweating right now. This was like this chunk. These two chapters are what I've been looking forward to and thinking about in the background pretty much the entire time I've been reading this book. I'm like, I want to do these right. I'm pretty happy. I think I could have been a little less scraggly on Father Paul de Rey's. Don't you like how like time is a flat circle and it's kind of like it's all cyclical and it's like, oh, we're coming back to the beginning where it's a Paul de Rey story. How wild is this? It's beautifully constructed. It's just such a beautifully constructed narrative. I really appreciate a well constructed narrative. And Dan Simmons, my God, does he deliver? He delivers. As you can see, I'm slightly excited. Ever so slightly amped up and excited over this. It's great. It's great. I'm also doing everything in my power to procrastinate from doing all the things I need to be doing, because that's how we do. So anyway, hopefully the clicks of the AI periods, I think they're supposed to be periods, weren't too annoying, but I figured I'd do it as sort of like a, radio interference click, even though it's well transcended past that point. At any rate, I tried some things. I don't know how well they worked. If they didn't work, oh well. If they did work, cool. Hopefully people enjoyed. I know I did, obviously. Um, and I gotta run. I will not be around this Monday, this coming Monday, but Wednesday and Friday should be no problem. Um, yeah, so there. I don't think I've got anything coming up next Friday. Don't think so. Don't think so. Or the one after. Actually, the one after might. I'll find out later. I'll know closer in. Anyway, should be no issue. Everything as normal. For my next Mecha Mondays, I still don't know what I'm going to do. Again, that's not going to be this coming Monday, but the Monday after, it'll be the Monday of April something or other. What is that? Oh no. Okay, well, we'll figure out what we're doing. I just realized what that date was, and then I try to commit to doing certain things on certain dates occasionally, and that's going to be what I'm going to have to do. So we're going to deal with that when we deal with that. Oh no, I have to do some planning. Oh no, how will I do that? I'm so lazy though. But yeah, with that, I'm going to go. To anybody wondering why these are so scraggly and rough and unprofessional, it's because I am scraggly, rough, and unprofessional. And I do them live. I don't edit these after the fact because partly I'm lazy and partly it's more of a because I have the technology to live stream something and have it saved on the platform in perpetuity until my account gets banned, whenever that happens. Or, the entropy, which in the next 25 years, give or take, things are looking bad. Like 2050 is looking like a, pretty much unavoidable collapse of human civilization as we know it. A lot of systems, a lot of systems are going to have some great difficulty functioning unless we get a couple miracles in the offing real fast, or really change our entire modus operandi as a species. And I don't think that's likely in 25 years. Do you? No, sirree, Bob. And even then, it's going to be bad. Um, anyway, enough doomsaying. Yeah. So I do them live. Typically, I stream on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, starting at around noon U.S. East Coast time, Eastern Standard Time, or Eastern Daily Time, I think is the other one. So you can pop that into whatever time zone calculator you need to put into to figure that one out. Otherwise, they're all on my YouTube channel. I usually update the playlists to be current and active roughly every month or so, which is not as often as it should be probably, but it works. It means not too much has accumulated in that time, but it's enough that so that it's a significant updating, but it's not so much or so little that it's like I'm having to do it all the time, which would be kind of annoying. Anyway, with that, I'm going to go. Stay safe as best you can. Stay sane as best you can. And be decent to each other. And listen, if the triune soul of humanity's empathy has traveled back in time to the year 2024 AD, sup? Um, this is probably not the best time for you to be getting lessons on empathy, and probably is more of a cautionary tale this time period. And for that, I want to say, as I scream into the void as a bunch of static signal, burning more energy than I probably should, having a massive carbon footprint in doing it, just by dint of doing it, um, I'm sorry. Uh, I'd apologize on behalf of humanity, but I think a lot of them wouldn't want me to. So, um, keep being empathetic, I guess. Empathy is a cool idea. I agree with it. I think it's a nice thing to do. I think sometimes I feel like I am part of a minority who believes that empathy is useful. Um, so I'm going to leave before I cry. I'm not that emotional, but I am pretty amped up. I might start saying things I might regret. I might call people out and say, fight me. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that. I try not to soapbox. I think I do sometimes. For that, I'm sorry if that drives people nuts. Sorry. I try not to. Uh, I'm not going to say I'm apolitical because everything is politicized now. So in the United States, holy shit, breathing is a political issue for fuck's sake. Christ on a fucking bike. It is so goddamn frustrating to try and have a conversation, a reasoned conversation, a debate with another human goddamn being in this country. It is so frustrating. God forbid you try to do it on the internet. That's no place for it. It's no longer the place of an exchange of ideas. It is not the marketplace of ideas. It's just the marketplace. Wow, I really am. I just felt my blood pressure plummet. It spiked and now it's plummeting, and I just want to curl up into a ball and sleep. So instead of doing that, I'm going to leave you all on a happy note. I enjoy doing these, and I will keep doing them. I'm not doing them for a financial incentive. They are a hobby, if you want to call it that. I don't do them professionally. I've had some people say maybe you should. And I'm like, cool. Sounds like work though. I do other things. So I'm going to keep doing these. That may piss some people off. I don't care. The only people I would be happy to piss off are the ones who are doing like AI translated text and then having an AI read it aloud. Y'all have no souls. First of all, they're not actual AIs. Stop calling them that. Stop calling them that. Language models, maybe, maybe, maybe. Text to speech, sure. The thing that blows me away is how awful they are at it. Even the good ones are awful. Like, I halt and stutter and sputter, and I'm not great at this all the time, but holy crap, at least I'm trying. Right? Right? Right. Right. So that's me procrastinating still. This is another one of the covers by, we're doing a hard transition, by Japanese guy whose name I've already forgotten. That didn't take long. What is your name, sir? No, that's not it. I'll find it eventually. I have too many tabs open. I had this saved. I went right by it. I went right by it like 4 times. It's fine. Oh, it's not coming to me. That's upsetting. Here we go. Noriyoshi Orai. It's the third of his Fall of Hyperion covers. Yes, there's some boobs there. Sorry. Humans have them. I know, crazy biology, right? Sometimes people have them. I don't know who that's supposed to be exactly. It could be Moneta. I don't know. Not everyone looks exactly the same. But yeah, he's got this great oil canvas look that he does. Anyway, that's it for me. I'm going.